Hello, once again, it's Steve, and I am here with Colonel John Mills. Colonel Mills, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Steve. It's an honor to be with you.
My honor, too. As you know, I've asked you to sit down and tell your story for the Gallery of Freedom Fighters. And I would like to start with this question, if you would. Please tell us, what does freedom mean to you, and why do you fight for it?
Well, I've reflected upon this, Steve. I think many Americans perhaps take the word freedom for granted. Uh, in my work and my career, I've worked with many strategic partners around the globe that are friends of America. I've also been required by my job put in situations where I have to interact with people who are perhaps not our friends and do not like us. The word freedom, I think as Americans, we need to take it more preciously. We need to understand it better. If you use the word freedom with a European, they'll say, yes, freedom. We believe in that. So what do you mean by freedom? And they say, oh, freedom. The government takes care of us and provides for everything. So we have freedom. We can do whatever we want. We can spend our time on personal interests. Okay, that's an interesting characterization of the word freedom. Sounds like socialism sliding into communism. If you understand the state of affairs in modern Europe, things are not going well. There's nothing, God does not necessarily designate, except with a few exceptions, chosen nations or tribes to continue on to perpetuate, forever and perpetually move on in the history and continuum of civilization. Civilizations do go away. So that's an interesting European version of the word freedom. In Asia or South Asia, Middle East, it's hard to explain and discuss the word freedom. And same with Africa and South Americans, and same thing. I've worked with groups from all over the world. The only ones who normally resonate with the concept of the word freedom are Europeans, and I think they have an upside down view of the word freedom. Now, Americans, I would suggest, in my definition, is this is rare and precious in the human continuum. The word freedom. It's established in our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence and the amendments to the Constitution. We have a distinct, unique, rare, and precious meaning of the word freedom. Now, if you boil down the word freedom in the American context, there's two basic tenets that are so important. They might seem mundane and people might not associate them. And what does this have to do with the word freedom? It has a lot to do with the word freedom. The American concept, you want to boil it down, boil everything down. Our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, there's two elements. It's the right of the individual to buy and sell property. Now, some who are easily triggered or who are scions of CRT and DEI immediately pounce upon that. You mean you're talking about slavery? No, absolutely not. It's actually the right of the individual to buy and sell property, like a home. And people pshaw and guffaw at that. Oh, come on, you can do that in other places. It's very difficult to buy and sell property in Europe or Asia or many other places for the common individual. Yeah, for the elite, yeah, okay, that's one thing. But that's actually for the common individual to buy and sell property, car, a home. You know, bring up car. I trigger all the environmentalists. Well, we don't need cars. Oh, really? I'm sorry. I like a car. So it's the right to sell and buy and sell property unfettered by the state or by other groups who will impose costs and regulation. This is important. This is really important. The other one is the right to litigate for real or perceived injustices. And people again will say, oh, Pasha, that's anybody you could do that in Europe. No, you can't. It's again for the common individual to do this is again, it's a steep hill. It's a steep hill. America's not perfect in any way in those two measures and a number of other measures. And Winston Churchill, I'm paraphrasing greatly, words to the effect, America is the worst form of government and governance in the world. The worst, except for all the others. So Americans, my definition of freedom is our Constitution and our Declaration. 13% fought in the Revolutionary War. Most people were fence sitters in special operations when you're profiling, and yes, I did use the word profile, the population. You put them in groups and segments as you understand them. It's common, it's the sinful nature of man and woman is to be a fence sitter. You and I were just talking about, see, 90%, so that's those numbers were pretty closely aligned here. Most people are fence sitters. They'll kind of go either way in conflict, struggles in society. 13% won the Revolutionary War, 3% were fighters, 10% were provided support, mainly ministers and their flocks, and or rabbis and their flocks. Okay, it's really, most people are fence sitters. 13% won the Revolutionary War. Now, once it's won, everybody wants to claim, be part of the victory. Yeah. Now, I have a lot of grace in this area, and I've been through a lot of conflict situations in my career, and people can be kind of harsh on, hey, you weren't with us when we were fighting. And I get that totally, and I believe in that. However, I also believe in grace. But that's the that's the state of fallen man and woman is they're fence sitters, which means they're kind of waffling and wobbly on the word freedom and its meaning in the American context. So those two basic tenets are what freedom means, and all of our incredible Constitution, which is the most closest to perfect human created document. I believe in human history, human created, not God inspired. The Old and the New Testament. Those are perfect words, but we're imperfect. The Constitution is not perfect, but grasp onto it, celebrate it. It's incredibly precious and rare in the human continuum. There's never been anything like our country, never. It's rare and precious in the human continuum. A small L liberal democratic republic. And if we allow my term for them is the crazies to roll it up and throw it in the dustbin of history, humans will never see anything like this again. And our system is different. People are you talking about exceptionalism? Well, yeah, I guess I am kind of talking about it. Show me any other system. Well, what about Chinese culture that predates all other things and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, and they had a horrible history with crushing totalitarianism throughout it. So yeah, I don't buy that. And with the many other cultures that predated what we would call Western civilization. Oh, I'm sorry, all these other, yeah, they may have predated. And what were they? They were crushing totalitarianism. There was no such thing as the individual. That's what's scary. That's what's scary to many people. Freedom also means the individual. The individual has a right to buy and sell property and the right to litigate. Show me another where it's anywhere close. Oh, you can do this in Europe. Yeah, no, you can't. Not anyway, shape or form, any close. You were so fettered in those activities. And how's that working out in Europe? We're seeing the collapse of Europe right now, right in front of our faces. It's a suicide. Wealthy, affluent societies who reject God, what do? They essentially commit suicide sooner or later. Rome, whatever. They go away because they've achieved everything, and there is no God. And so they have no purpose. And they said, now is the time to just remove ourselves from the gene pool. Yeah, I don't believe in that. I'm not in with that group. I think that's horrible. It's a horrible idea. It's bad because it's a secular humanist viewpoint that actually does reject freedom. So we have two basic tenets of freedom. We're rare and special and precious. And I say we do whatever we can to make sure this continues on for at least the next generation.
That's great. You mentioned the fence sitters. Were you ever a fence sitter?
Well, that's a good question, Steve. I don't believe some people would say John Mills is judgmental because he's making a decision and he's not being a fence sitter. I'm usually not a fence sitter. I think it wise in some situations to be reasoned and take your time. But at the same time, life is short and rare. It's like a vapor. The Bible says that it's like a vapor and it's gone. So in a perfect world, you'd have all the time in the world to analyze and ponder and reflect. The reality is you got to make decisions in life. Not making a decision is a decision. So I'm usually not a fence sitter.
And several times you mentioned the importance of God, God inspiration, words of God. Has God always played a major role in your life? Are you doing God's work?
Well, thank you, Steve. I'm fallen and imperfect. I'm doing my best. I'm a saved believer in Christ. In April of 1995, was baptized. I grew up in a non-evangelical home where kind of went to church, but it was a group, it was a club. There was not meaning and depth to it, and so I do my best. It was when I met my wife 33 years ago, or 35 years ago. We've been married for over 33, almost 34 years. Uh, I immediately knew she was the one. And by that time, I was 22. But I mean, I was at my initial military training officer basic course. I saw her. I knew immediately she was the one. We started dating, and she said, before we go any further, you need to be a saved believer in Christ. I go, sure, absolutely. Okay, what's next? No, so she got me in front of a pastor, Tom and Cora Sears, and they walked me through the Romans Road and God's plan for salvation. Man is imperfect and fallen, and only through Christ. That's our belief. I don't great love and admiration for our Old Testament brothers and sisters, and believe in a very kindred unity there. But yeah, my wife said, "Hey, So I became a saved believer in Christ, and then later I was baptized by Charlie Chilton at Grace Baptist in 1995, and but been attending Heritage Independent. I don't know if you're allowed to say this in the year 2023. Independent Fundamental Baptist Church. Yes, I said that. So it's a great church. Pastor Mark Carpenter is just wonderful. Founded by Pastor Mike Edwards, who just created this large, wonderful work from nothing. And he's God inspired. And Pastor Carpenter has just been incredible. So I do my best. I lead a youth group in our church. Asked to lead a youth group called SEALs. It's a special operations unit for the kids. So it's all volunteer. You got to want to be here. Soldiers enlisted as the Lord's servants. And so we train them to be better witnesses for Christ, understand the Romans Road plan of salvation, be bold witnesses wherever they're at. And so, but it's a special operations unit. It's not for everyone. So that's one of the ministries I lead, and also I'm developing a ministry for. And it's called we do it on the 5M Foundation. That's our foundation in Virginia, the 5M, and we want to do STEAM, not STEM, STEAM, science, technology, engineering, English, the arts, and math. A high correlation between music and math and engineering, and if you can't write about your great engineering project, so what? You got to be able. So I'm working on a STEAM program for schools of faith, uh, and so that's is to build up, because we want to build a cadre of STEAM disciples as part of their witnessing and part of their schooling, and so that's a ministry I'm working on now, is the STEAM program in addition to the SEALs at church.
Do you consider yourself to be a hopeful person?
Well, I try to be. I try to be an optimist, but sometimes people kind of, oh, John, you're always worried about the worst, and my kids, I'll mention my children. Two of them are adults now, but we have one that's still a youth. Um, you're afraid somebody's going to kidnap us or assault us. Well, the world has changed and American culture has changed. And after seeing Sound of Freedom, I'm going, that's why. And we saw it. And I said, that's why I'm not a downer, but always be aware and vigilant. So that explains maybe my unoptimistic side, but I don't look at it that way. I said, just be vigilant. You always be aware of what's going on around you. But on the positive side, I'm like Reagan. There's a pony somewhere in this pile, and I'm just going to keep on digging. And no matter how bad we have it here, we do have I've never seen it like this after almost 40 years of national security service in different functions. I never thought we'd be at this point in America with a president who's now factually established as receiving foreign funds. People say, "Oh, that happens all the time." No, it doesn't happen all the time. I challenge even Obama. Show me where Obama or Clinton received foreign funds. Now, maybe they did, it hasn't been revealed yet. But I'm kind of fairly understanding of these sensitive investigation processes, and this is different with Biden. So I never thought we'd be here, but I'm optimistic, despite how bad it may seem, that we will prevail as long as we put our shoulder to the grindstone and push and get off the couch and get in the game, and not just bellow on social media. Oh, I do consider myself optimistic.
What's the source of that optimism? Is it part of your nature, or do you have sources that you review on a daily basis that strengthen your optimism?
Well, I do a daily scriptural read. We have a daily scriptural read that's posted on our website. So that's where daily Old and New Testament read. Pray about things, and I'll pray for those 5 things. Those who are closest to us, those places where you work or have a involvement, could be work, could be social activity. I pray for our county, our state, our nation, the world. Those who need help and special prayers, and then myself I'm fallen and imperfect, and to always try to be a good witness. So that's why I do a daily reading, pray for those 5 things, and That's a daily event.
Are you saying that prayer works?
I think it does, and I try not to be. I think the challenge is if you're not involved in a regular prayer life and that's part of your daily routine, and you do it and you do your best to meet it and act it out. I think the challenge is people say, well, I say a prayer, it didn't work, therefore there is no God. On to the next topic. You gotta be a little more deeper and devoted than that. And and you do have to seek God's guidance, and seek God's will in all situations. And the first step, no matter what, is to always even just say a quick prayer. Lord, what do I do in this situation? That's prayer. There's model prayer in the Bible, but that's, you don't have to be overly sophisticated on this, but do try to be spiritually minded at all times. And I think that's one of the big sources of my optimism and I think it is a little bit of my nature too. I'm I I'm kind of like I've approached life in many ways like Jim Brown, the famous Cleveland running back, who I think is the greatest running back of all time. I just run over problems. Now, sometimes it doesn't always work. Sometimes I get knocked down, but I do my best to just get up, grab the ball, and run again. And somewhere like Reagan, I'm greatly paraphrasing. Somewhere there's a pony in this pile. Saying I wanted, I have a vision. I want to do my best to accomplish it, but I'm prayerful about the guidance from God. But many ways, that's just an innate. But God inspired that and gave that to me. I was preloaded with that from God upon birth. Was that nature to just grab the ball and run over the obstacles, but try to use wisdom also to no reason to run into an obstacle when you can go left or right around it. So uh, those are the sources of my optimism, I guess.
Hmm. You've mentioned several times we getting off the bench. Who in your eyes is the we? Is it the people that are used to being leaders? Is it the entire American population? Is it people of a certain religion? Who's the we that needs to get off the bench here?
Well, the American system is a participative system. That means all of us. If you're an American citizen, you got to get involved. And I call them in my book, The Nation Will Follow. I call them the 7 common centers of governance that are common to all 3,300 or so counties and counties equivalents. That's in 50 states and the 8 U.S. territories. America still has territories, just for those who have been swayed by Howard Zinn history books. Those are American citizens in those territories. So 3,300 counties. Those 7 common centers of governance are the foundation of our constitutional republic. And that's our county council, election board, school board, registrar, sheriffs, judges, and prosecutors. That is the foundation of the American constitutional system. And everybody's like, we don't call them a registrar, we call them a recorder. Okay, whatever you call them. Everyone, please get over this. People, that's not what we do it in Michigan. We call them this. Okay, Michigan, got it. It's the same thing, So, I live in a city. Okay, a city can be a county equivalent according to the U.S. Census Bureau. So everybody, get over this stuff. It's the same 7 common centers of governance. And we learned a hard lesson in 2020, and I've given sworn federal testimony on this subject. We learned a hard lesson in 2020 because we always presumed as good Americans, following God, family, and country, which was the right order of precedence, but we forgot that he get involved. And I'll point to the New Testament, Romans 13 says, get involved in governance. we wandered away, and we always presumed, and this I started saying this in 2019, long before the election, on media. We always presumed somebody else was taking care of things at the local level. And we were absolutely right. Somebody else was taking care of things. And oftentimes it was groups and people who are far more concerned with tyranny and cooking the books at the local level than the being clean counties or county equivalents. We learned a hard lesson. And that's what I mean is every American, it's not when they say the price of freedom, they always say, raising the flag on Iwo Jima. Okay, that's okay, our military, and I've been there and I got that. That's an important aspect. But as American citizens, we forgot that the price of freedom is largely us showing up and getting involved on a regular basis of at least one of these 7 common centers of governance, these stupid, boring meetings. They said, that has nothing to do with me. Oh, really? Yes, it does. My kids are grown. My kids are, we homeschool. They're in the school of faith. Why in the world would I go to a school board meeting? Oh, you better go to a school board meeting regardless. So we've got, and that's one good thing about the pandemic, is we learned the craziness of a lot of these 7 governors, especially the school system. I'm not a hater or basher of the public school system, but in all of these governance centers, I believe in absolute transparency and accountability. And a lot of counties, we don't have that. People say, I live in a red county. Oh, do you? Maybe it's redder than you think. I used to be in a deep red county. We're digging out of a hole here because we stopped showing up. And I was part of the problem. I didn't say, what do you have to do with me? I couldn't care less what's going on at the county council meeting. Well, now we know better. So the price of freedom is largely getting involved. And so get off the couch, put down, I always tell people, especially the guys, because the women are doing a good job on this, but often it's the guys that put down that bowl of loudmouth soup, stop bellowing on social media, go to these meetings. People, show me hands. Who's gone to any of these meetings? A very small number will raise their hands. And I go, okay, how did it go? Most people will say, I went to one meeting, nothing happened. I didn't go anymore. Go, okay, got to have a little more endurance than one meeting. Did you read anything? Did you read the state election code? I can't do that. I need a lawyer. Okay. Getting a lawyer involved in this is a very bad idea. You'll die of old age or go broke doing the nug work that you should be doing as an American. If you can read English, you can read the election code and probably come up with a better interpretation than any lawyer. So read these documents. This is your documents, people. Come on. This is your documents. I'm too busy. Well, then get used to tyranny. Okay. Because this is where we gave away the farm.
I get that. All right, so let's end on this question. You're speaking to a room of 100 people who are kind of on the fence, and somebody says, Colonel Mills, I get it. I get the importance in participating, but frankly, and don't come down on me for sharing, I'm afraid of being canceled. I'm afraid of being called a hater. I'm afraid of being doxxed. I'm afraid of people showing up outside my house and yelling at my wife and kids. I got to tell you, I'm a man, but I'm afraid. You want men to step up? I'm showing my soft side. I'm afraid. So what encouragement would you give somebody like that to take that step and show up and actually go to the microphone and say, this is what I think?
Well, that's a great question, Stephen, and a valid point. And when I first started getting involved in public matters like this, I was very concerned about being identified. It was scary for me, and I go, okay, this is going to be bad. They're going to identify me. I'm supporting a family. I don't want to lose my job, things like that. And this is where I can't really involve these things in much when I'm in government, but I had already departed government. Okay. So, but I still had to there were business and work issues that I had to be mindful of. But I would say, and it took me a while to build up confidence because I say, John, you're on, you seem to have no problem going on the air saying these things. And I say, well, you have to build in your mind good left and right boundaries on things you say. You should never make threats. You should never make accusations that you can't support factually. I think that's the challenge. A lot of people want to get involved. You hand them a microphone and they'll just make statements that are unwise. So you can't accuse a public official of a crime and then have no evidence. I know they're cheating. That's not going to stand in a court, and it's going to be a very rough day in court for you because you just might find yourself in court for making a statement like that because law enforcement resources might be mobilized to investigate this assertion and they'll find no evidence. Guess what? You're held to account for that. So we're all held to account. So be thoughtful, be reasoned. Don't make wild accusations that have no basis in fact. We may feel it, and it may actually be true. We just haven't gotten the evidence yet. Okay, so be mindful. Don't say things until you have the firm evidence. Don't be threatening. I just again I say this. I love everybody who's getting active, but people have asked me to read letters, and we need to be more thoughtful because again I'll find in writing signed people have made statements that could be interpreted as threatening. And I said, wow, if I was a public official and received this, I would take this as you are threatening me with violence. And so people, and I've read these letters and I go, wow, you haven't sent this yet, have you? Yeah, I've already sent it. Okay, why didn't you give that to me before you sent it? Because it's kind of hard to unsend it once you've sent a letter like this. I think those are good rules and guidance to build confidence and boundaries to shape. If you step forward in an open mic session in a school board and make a reasoned statement, yeah, you might get some blowback, but again, this is the price of freedom. This is the price of freedom, and confidence builds confidence. Positivity breeds positivity. Action breeds action, and we're action. I don't have a nanosecond of time. A lot of these groups form and then they just become nothing but everybody wants to complain about what are they doing to us today? They're lying, they're cheating, they're stealing, it's awful, it'll never get better. It's like, yeah, I don't have a nanosecond of time for that. If I detect any group has turned into a knitting club of complainers, yeah, that's not me, not interested. And I get invited. I wouldn't have time to breathe the number of invites I get. Can you attend this? Be part of this group. Be part of that group. No. I mean, as soon as I detect it's a complainers club, I'm out. So action. Yeah, I know they're doing this. What's the action? Maybe it's 20 years of writing action memos for the Secretary of Defense and the president and things like that. Here's a complex issue. So what? What's the action? Action, as Brother Bannon would say. So just say reasoned, thoughtful things, do some research, and most groups are going to actually be intimidated by that and are not going to show up at your house and are not going to try to cancel you because you're demonstrating that you've actually applied some thought and reason to this matter. And you're not just making wild accusations. Okay. And that actually intimidates many officials. Wow, this citizen has thought about things. Even, and I'll use the term crazies on the left. I'll be honest, I've had the most problem from my local GOP. They've been far more active against me than anybody else. I'm going, where are the Democrats? Where are the blue Where are the blue crazies? I mean, it's the GOP that's attacked me. The two chairmen in a row are gone because they wanted to attack me. And it's like, so establish that gravitas, but you're not going to get attacked, but it'll take time. Working on your speaking skill, but this is the price of freedom. You got to get up to that microphone. Don't complain if you're not getting up to that microphone and saying something thoughtful and reasoned.
What a great way to end. You've been so kind, Colonel Mills, in sharing your wisdom and your guidance, but also from your heart and the grace you feel you've been given, you've passed on to us. Thank you for that gift. And I'm so encouraged because I know that people watching this interview will be moved. And I'm encouraged because people will then decide to go to the microphone under the proper guidance and have an impact. Thank you for sharing that today. I'm so appreciative.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm just humbled and honored that you would ask me to do this, and it's been a great time. I really appreciate you doing this also and your action, making a difference. Thank you so much, Steve.
It is my honor.